Welcome to today's webinar, brought to you by the Current Consulting Group and sponsored by Abbott. I'm Greta Walsh of the Current Consulting Group, and today's presentation is titled The Rise in On-Site Testing. Today's presentation is sponsored by Abbott. Abbott creates life-changing technologies and products that help people live healthier, fuller lives. With a proven history under the established eScreen brand, Abbott is your trusted partner to deliver substance abuse testing and occupational health services that help you achieve a safe, healthy, and productive workplace. If you would like more information about the available products and services from Abbott, email them at marketing@escreen.com. Today's presentation qualifies for one continuing education credit from SHRM, HRCI, and CCDAP for those who attend the presentation in its entirety. You will receive information following today's webinar on how to apply for that credit. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Bill Current from the Current Consulting Group.
Well, thank you very much, Greta, and welcome everyone to today's webinar presentation. We are really excited today to be sponsored by Abbott, one of the top brands in the drug testing industry for sure. Every year, the Current Consulting Group, for the last 26 years now, I started the company in 1998. And so from the very beginning, we have conducted a survey of the drug testing industry. And as part of that survey, many years ago, we added a section on brand name recognition. So we asked people who participate in the survey to name the brand that the top 3 brands that come to mind when they think of, say, lab-based urine testing or rapid oral fluid testing or medical review officer services, etc. And so as part of that survey every year, the Abbott brand scores high in virtually every category, and they're the #1 recognized brand in rapid result urine testing. So we're grateful to be sponsored today by Abbott. And I'm also excited today to be co-presenting with Yvette Farnsworth Baker, who's our attorney here at the Current Consulting Group. You can see our bios on the screen. I get teased a lot that this is my favorite slide in the presentation, but I've got some other favorites coming up here in a minute. But really excited to be co-presenting with Yvette, and I'll be turning some of the slides over to her here in just a minute. Let me introduce the agenda that we're going to follow. We're going to we're going to have a little introduction that I'll do, and then I'll turn it over to Yvette to talk about state drug testing laws as they relate to our topic today, which is on-site rapid result testing. We'll compare on-site rapid result testing with lab-based testing, both urine and oral fluid. We'll talk about ideal workplace settings for this technology, what to look for in a rapid result device, and then we'll talk about how to compare and measure return on investment when it comes to on-site testing. That's a topic we could do an entire webinar on, but we've just picked one example that I'll share with you at the very end of today's presentation. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but one of my favorite all-time business books is The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen R. Covey, the late Stephen R. Covey. And so one of those principles is start with the end in mind, and I've applied that in my life and in my business. And I want to do it with the webinar today to make sure we don't miss these points. You know, what is it about rapid testing, rapid result testing, on-site testing, etc., that is of such appeal to employers in this particular time? And so I've come up with this list here. Rapid testing saves time and cuts costs, and that's what employers are looking for. You see a couple of the Abbott devices there on the right, the urine cup at the top and the oral fluid device at the bottom. Rapid testing sort of streamlines the entire drug testing process. We're going to talk about how that's done. And in many instances, in many situations, especially for pre-employment testing, it improves the donor experience, and it makes same-day hiring decisions possible. And in the event of a negative test result after an accident or in a reasonable suspicion circumstance, it puts employees back to work faster. You're not waiting a day or 2 or 3 to get a result back from the laboratory. So it improves productivity, essentially. And that's going to be part of the ROI formula that I share with you at the very end. And in the case of rapid oral fluid testing, every collection is 100% observed. And so you're eliminating virtually all of the very common popular drug test cheating methods that are used with urine. Now, years and years ago, when I started the company, I was consulting for one of the major providers of rapid result testing back in those days. And in those days, we called it on-site testing. You can see that in the lower right corner. And today, there's lots of different names that are used to basically describe the same thing. So sometimes you'll hear instant testing or instant result testing, rapid testing or rapid result testing. Very common to hear the acronym POCT, which sometimes somebody's thinking of point of collection. It's a test that's conducted where the collection takes place, or sometimes point of care, which typically applies to a different setting than maybe a workplace drug test. And then we still use the word on-site testing in some circumstances because the test occurs on-site at the workplace. So whether you're talking about instant result testing, rapid result testing, POCT, or on-site testing, we're kind of basically referring to the same thing. So during today's presentation, I'm mostly going to use the term rapid testing, rapid result with on-site testing. And basically what we're talking about is a single-use device that renders a near immediate positive or negative result. Okay, so it's a disposable single-use device typically, and it can be used almost anywhere, really, right? It could be at the workplace, it could be where job interviews are being conducted. It can even be used at a collection facility offsite where you normally send workers to void a urine sample. Whether you're doing a rapid urine test or rapid oral fluid test, it can take place at those locations as well. And it can be administered by a professional technician, a professional collector, or a trained employee, typically in the case of rapid oral fluid testing. Well, more about that in a minute. But also, very important, depending on the device, you can often send the same sample that you use for that rapid result to the laboratory for confirmation testing when you have a presumptive positive from that screen. Okay, so the screen is typically going to give you a positive or negative result. And if it's positive, which we sometimes refer to as a presumptive positive or a non-negative, you're going to send that sample or collect another sample in some cases, but you're going to send the sample to the laboratory for confirmation testing. And you'll find that in many cases, confirmation testing is not just a good practice, but in some states, in many states, it's required. Even if you're doing a rapid test, if you get a presumptive positive, you send the sample to a laboratory for confirmation testing. Now, throughout today's presentation, we're going to insert some polling questions where we're going to pause and ask you a question, then we're going to read the results back to you. So let's pause now for our first polling question and bring Greta back in to help us with that.
Thank you, Bill. For our first poll, do you use on-site rapid result drug testing? So I'll give everyone a few seconds to participate. We do appreciate your participation, and just go ahead and choose one answer. And the results are 27% indicated no, 24% indicated yes with urine, 6% yes with oral fluid, 31% yes with both urine and oral fluid, and 11% said no, but I'd like to learn more.
All right. Thank you, Greta. Great answers. That's very helpful as we go forward. If you have any questions, though, about any of the things we talked about today, put them in the chat section or in the Q&A section, and we'll get to them. And if there's anything we don't get to today during today's presentation, like Greta said, we'll respond by email and make sure we get you an answer. So when it comes to any testing program, but especially as we're talking about on-site rapid testing, there are really three critical questions that you've got to answer. Is it legal? Is it accurate? And on a day-to-day basis for your workplace, is it practical? So generally speaking, yes, rapid on-site testing is legal, maybe not in every state or under certain circumstances, which Yvette's going to share some examples with us. But yes, generally speaking, it is legal by most state laws. Yeah, as you know, in the United States, every state has its own drug testing law or case law that governs how drug testing is conducted in that state. There's no one standard that applies throughout the whole country, except under certain circumstances, like under the DOT regulations. So legal, yes, but not everywhere or in every situation. Is it accurate? Absolutely. Both urine and oral fluid testing, but much depends on the device that you're using. They're not all the same. They may look alike, but they're not all equally created. So be careful on that. The folks at Abbott can help you with that, of course. And is it practical? Well, that's going to depend on how you use it. Okay, we'll talk about some circumstances there. Now, I mentioned before that at the Current Consulting Group, we do a survey every year of the drug testing industry. And in the 2024 survey, which we released the results at the NDASA conference back in May, we asked the question, do you have clients? Okay, so we're talking to drug testing providers, professionals in the business. Do you have clients who use POCT or rapid result devices? That big blue part of the dial there on the right is yes, urine POCT, 81%. I'm not surprised by that, right? 81%. If they're doing POCT, it very likely is urine. But look over to the left there at about 9 o'clock on the dial. Yes, oral fluid POCT, 54%. And the reason I emphasize that is because we're seeing a fairly significant steady growth in the percentage of drug testing providers who offer oral fluid, whether it's lab-based or rapid result, and employers who are interested in oral fluid testing. A lot of that having to do with last year's issuance of final regulations for lab-based oral fluid testing by the Department of Transportation. Now look up at sort of the top of the dial there, around 12 o'clock, 13% said no. In the same way that 54% yes, oral fluid POCT has increased, the percentage that say no, they don't have any clients using POCT has been decreasing steadily over the years. In other words, we're seeing growth in this category. And we also asked the question, over the next 3 years, do you think POCT testing will increase? And as you can see there, the blue bar to the left, 68% said yes, and 28% said it'll stay the same. Now, as far as the stay the same category goes, it's a relative term, right? Because we don't know what volume they're talking about. But generally speaking, that group is saying it's going to remain steady, whatever their volume of sales of these devices is. But 68% of people in the industry believe there's going to be a lot of growth in this category of drug testing, point of collection, on-site, rapid result, whatever you want to call it. Only 5% thought it was going to decrease. So a very small minority there, or percentage there. So I think on-site rapid testing is growing in popularity, whether it's urine or oral fluid. And most people in the industry believe that it's either going to stay the same or we're going to see an increase in the use of these rapid result devices. So now I'd like to turn the microphone, the virtual microphone, over to my associate, Ibad, who will talk about state drug testing laws and how they apply to on-site rapid result testing.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Abbott, for having me today. I'm happy to be with all you today, and like Bill said, I'm going to start out talking a little bit about state drug testing laws related to on-site rapid testing. I'm not going to cover every state, obviously, and this is not legal advice. This is just some legal information, but I want to get you started on understanding state laws related to rapid on-site testing. So just really briefly, I'm going to run through the different types of laws that affect workplace drug testing, just so that we're all coming from a basic understanding when I'm discussing specific state laws. What we usually think of when we think about drug testing laws in the state is a mandatory law. The state passes a law, it applies to every employer in the state who is conducting drug testing and may have some restrictions or regulation regarding how they can conduct workplace drug testing. There are also laws that we call voluntary laws. Now, a voluntary law will set out restrictions or methods for drug testing and attach an incentive to it. And an employer can comply with those voluntary laws and receive the incentive, or if the employer does not want to receive the incentive, they can choose to drug test however they want. So that's why it's voluntary. You comply with those laws to receive the incentive, and the incentive usually is a discount on workers' compensation insurance premiums. There's a few other incentives that can come into play. But an employer who doesn't want that incentive can drug test however they want. We have case law. We're not going to talk too much about case law today. That's laws that come from a court decision or a judge's opinion or decision in a case. Workers and unemployment compensation laws, these are similar to voluntary laws, where if an employer wants to deny workers' comp or unemployment comp benefits based on a positive drug test, they have to follow the laws regarding drug testing in order to deny benefits. We have industry-specific laws. These only apply to certain industries. It might apply to bus drivers or to the mining industry or to those working on public works projects. And employers who are not in those industries don't have to comply. And then, of course, medical and recreational marijuana laws, which, we can spend several hours talking about those, but we'll just touch on those a little bit today. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of mandatory laws that affect rapid on-site testing. So the state of Minnesota has mandatory workplace drug testing laws, which all employers within the state of Minnesota who are conducting drug testing have to comply with. So Minnesota's mandatory law says all testing must use the services of a certified laboratory. However, we have a brand new law in Minnesota that just came into effect this month that says an employer may choose to perform an on-site oral fluid test. And it has a few restrictions there. The employee has to be informed of the test results at the time of the test. And then the employee or the donor has 48 hours after a positive, inconclusive, or invalid test to request a lab-based test. But Minnesota has amended their laws to allow rapid oral fluid testing as long as it complies with these certain restrictions. More mandatory law examples are Iowa. So Iowa has a mandatory drug testing law, but Iowa's law does not mention rapid or on-site testing at all. And so what that means is it's permitted in Iowa. There are no restrictions. Generally, I'm talking in big generalities here, but in employment law, if there are no restrictions on the employer, then the employer can do that. So Iowa's mandatory law does not place any restrictions on rapid on-site testing. So that means in Iowa, it's permitted. Illinois permits rapid on-site testing, except for companies that are doing public works projects. North Carolina permits rapid on-site testing only for pre-employment screening. In North Carolina, testing of employees has to be lab-based. Vermont is an example of a state with a mandatory drug testing law that does not permit rapid on-site testing at all. It's one of very, very, very few states that just outright prohibits rapid on-site testing. West Virginia has a mandatory law that applies to the mining industry that prohibits rapid on-site testing, but other on-site testing in West Virginia is permitted. So let's move on and look at some voluntary laws. Like I said, in these laws, an employer only has to abide by these regulations if they're choosing to participate in the voluntary program in order to receive the incentive. If an employer wants to do rapid on-site testing and the voluntary law doesn't permit it, they can go ahead and do on-site testing. It's just not going to qualify for the incentive in that voluntary law program. So Alaska has a voluntary law, and this is another law that just very recently changed, and I believe this was only signed into law this month, August of 2024. It permits rapid on-site testing, but many conditions apply, including using an FDA-cleared device, confirmation testing, and no permanent employment action unless the result has been confirmed. Georgia has a voluntary law that allows rapid on-site testing for pre-employment only. Current employee testing has to take place in a laboratory. Utah has a voluntary law that permits rapid on-site testing, but in a weird wording in the law, it states that urine testing has to take place in a certified lab. So rapid testing can be done for other samples, but urine testing has to be lab-based. As well in Utah, presumptive positives have to be confirmed by GCMS. Did I skip one? Nope. So let's talk really briefly about what to look for in state laws that are going to guide how you determine if rapid on-site testing is permitted. And just to begin with, I'm going to let you know that at Current Consulting Group, we maintain a subscription-based database that tracks all the state laws and Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. that relate to drug testing in the workplace. So if this all feels a little overwhelming and confusing to try and understand what state laws might apply, just know that that's our expertise at Current Consulting Group, and we do have a subscription-based service where you can look up the laws in any state and some of the jurisdictions in the United States to know what the laws say about workplace drug testing, and that's going to include all of these laws that relate to rapid on-site testing. So the first most obvious is looking if the law specifically mentions rapid on-site testing, POCT, point of collection testing, and either specifically permits or prohibits that kind of testing. That's a little obvious. Another thing to look for is whether the state requires procedures that mirror Department of Transportation or SAMHSA standards. This may not outright prohibit rapid on-site testing, but if procedures are very specifically required to follow Department of Transportation, that might make it untenable to do rapid on-site testing. So that's one thing to look for. Another thing you'll need to look at is laboratory licensing laws, and this can be a little bit tricky. Some states have laboratory licensing laws that will say, in essence, any drug testing being conducted needs to be conducted somewhere that is certified as a laboratory, or that has certain collectors such as a doctor or a nurse or a laboratory staff person. So the laboratory licensing laws may make it very difficult to conduct rapid testing in the workplace, and it may require that rapid testing has to be done in a laboratory or in a different kind of facility that is certified by the state. You'll also want to look for reference to specific specimens that are permitted or disallowed, which can impact what kind of rapid testing you can do, and look for catch-all phrases like bodily specimens, bodily fluids, which are a little more open-ended than laws that specifically mention urine, oral fluid, breath, and that sort of thing. I'm going to do a quick note about Department of Transportation regulations, as I mentioned them just a minute ago. Rapid on-site testing is not permitted for employers and employees who are regulated by the Department of Transportation. But you also want to be aware of whether your state defers to SAMHSA or DOT regulations in their required procedures. So what it may, of course, we have employers and employees who are regulated by the Department of Transportation, and you'll know who you are if that's you, and have to follow very specific procedures and testing types, which do not include the possibility of doing rapid on-site testing. But additionally, you want to look at a few states, it's not very many, but a few states will say workplace drug testing needs to comply with the procedures of Department of Transportation. And so you'll want to be aware of the states in which you operate, whether they defer to DOT or SAMHSA procedures when considering whether rapid on-site testing is a possibility for your place of employment. So now I am going to turn it back over to Bill to talk a little bit about comparing rapid on-site testing with lab-based testing, and I'll join you back in a little while.
Okay, thank you, Yvette. So today we live in the age in which there are lots of different drug testing options. You've got lab-based urine and instant result urine testing. You got hair testing, which typically is a lab-based test. I'll talk more about that in a minute. You got lab-based oral fluid testing, and you've got instant oral fluid testing. And those are the three primary specimens for testing: urine, hair, and oral fluid, and whether it's lab-based or it's instant. So those are your choices, right? And years ago when I got into this business, it was really just sort of lab-based urine testing. And over the years, these technologies have emerged, and hair testing and oral fluid testing are very acceptable. Some of them are very popular in certain industries more than others. And in certain markets outside of the workplace, you'll see a lot of hair testing taking place in, say, criminal justice markets, probation, parole, where they're interested in lifestyle drug abuse detection. So these are the three primary methods that are available. And so let's pause and do another poll. Greta, why don't you come on and take care of poll number 2 for us?
Thank you, Bill. For our second poll, if you do not currently use on-site rapid result testing, what would be the #1 reason that might motivate you to consider it? I'll give everyone a few seconds. And 39% indicated immediate results, 25% said being able to hire people faster, 20% said eliminating the use of off-site collection facilities, and 16% said if it would save money compared to our current program.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Not surprised by those results. Immediate results really sort of are tied to being able to hire people faster. So when you combine those two results, it was pretty much the majority of people want to see faster results so they can make faster employment related decisions. So thank you, excellent information, audience. So let's look at the 3 different drug testing methods that I mentioned before and compare them side by side by side. So you've got urine, and that first row there is whether or not lab-based or on-site testing is available in that specimen or for that specimen. So with urine, yes, there's both lab-based and rapid result on-site testing. For oral fluid, there's both lab-based and rapid result, very, very popular, both methods in urine and oral fluid. Hair testing has traditionally, over the course of time, been a lab-based only test. There is a rapid result hair processor product out there now. It's new. We'll see how that catches on. Probably very popular, maybe, like I said, in criminal justice markets with probation and parole and things of that nature. We'll see if it catches on for the workplace market. But generally, hair has been a lab-based test. Window of detection varies significantly. With urine, it's about 3 to 4 days at the cutoff levels that we typically use. And those are governed by either the SAMHSA regulations or by state law, and many state laws, as Yvette mentioned, sort of defer to the SAMHSA regulations for things like cutoff levels. And so typically it's about 3 to 4 days. With oral fluid, it depends. If it's a point of collection test, it's about 12 plus hours for THC. If it's lab-based, it's 24 plus hours for THC. And then for other drugs, it's going to be somewhere around 24 to 48 hours. But notice the ranges that I put on there and the plus marks, et cetera, because you can go to a lot of different sources for this kind of information and it'll tell you different things. So this is just one example, okay? You might find something different elsewhere. With hair testing, we're looking at up to 90 days. Now, the next row is important, recent use detection. With urine testing, there's a lag time of several hours before drugs become detectable in urine, because with urine, we're testing for metabolites. We're trying to identify metabolites of the drug, of a drug or drugs, and that takes, let's say, 6 to 7 hours before those metabolites become detectable in a urine sample. With oral fluid testing, because we're identifying the parent drug or the drug itself, typically the window of detection opens up within, say, 10 to 15 minutes after somebody uses a drug, but you'll have those shorter, tighter windows of detection, as I mentioned up above. With urine, 3 to 4 days, but with oral fluid, sometimes less than 24 hours, like in the case of POCT with THC or cannabis. With hair testing, we've got a lag time of 7 to 10 days before drugs become detectable in a hair sample, but you're going to have that long 90-day window of detection. And now, if somebody's a chronic drug user, they're going to have evidence of drug use in their hair follicles all the time, right? Because they're using drugs all the time. But generally, today's drug use is not going to show up for about 7 to 10 days in a hair sample, but it's going to remain detectable for up to 2-3 months. Legal in every state, urine testing by far wins this category. Lab-based oral fluid testing is legal in 47 states. The exceptions are Hawaii, Maine, and Vermont. And then, just like with urine, POCT or on-site rapid testing, I'm going to say where permitted, as Yvette was walking us through that on the state law information. You can see it depends on a lot of things. What kind of state law do they have, etc. What industry are you talking about? With hair testing, again, it's most states, not every state, but it's most states. The SAMHSA regulations are sort of this blueprint for how to do drug testing. And they exist for lab-based urine testing, and they exist for lab-based oral fluid testing, because both SAMHSA and DOT have adopted lab-based testing regulations for both urine and oral fluid. Now, those oral fluid testing regulations are not actually in effect yet, technically, because we're still waiting for at least 2 laboratories to be certified to do oral fluid testing by HHS. But once that happens and a couple of other qualifiers have been met, then you'll see a lot of companies that are mandated to do drug testing by DOT, for example, having the choice between oral fluid and urine, but lab-based only. With hair testing, back in 2020, there were proposed regulations for hair testing. Now we're 4 years later and we still don't have much movement on that, or any movement really to brag about. So we'll see where that goes. But right now, yes for oral fluid and yes for urine. And then detection of drugs, virtually all drugs in all 3 of these categories. But there are some limitations. I put an asterisk there just to remind myself that under the DOT regulations, it's typically referred to as a 5-panel test. But outside of the DOT regulations, you see a lot of companies wanting to do more than just 5 drugs. And so a 9, a 10, 11, 12 panel drug test is not uncommon depending on the industries. When we put rapid on-site testing, you know, the pros and cons side by side, it's a pretty favorable comparison here. You know, and some of the pros with rapid urine testing apply to rapid oral fluid testing. A lot of it has to do with, you know, what kind of objectives do you have for your drug testing program? Are you looking to get results fast because you want to be able to make fast hiring decisions? You're in a very labor competitive market and you're having trouble filling positions, but you still want to enjoy the benefits of drug testing and its impact on safety and productivity in the workplace. And so you can see the pros there start to line up in favor of rapid testing, right? And then just look towards the bottom, the second from the bottom, the results are available within minutes, and the same sample sometimes can be used to send to a lab for confirmation testing. On the con side, they're really not cons, they're just things you have to take into consideration. Like, for example, where you're doing the test, whether it's in the workplace or at an offsite facility, do they have the device available? And that's something Abbott can help you with, because they've got a huge network of collection sites that have their products available. So I talked to the folks at Abbott to help you with those decisions. But you're still going to have some of the challenges with urine testing that apply to both lab-based and rapid testing, like, for example, adulteration. That can still be a problem regardless of whether you're talking about lab-based or rapid. The differences between the rapid and the lab-based are significant, but again, it depends on what your needs are, what your objectives are, right? So the immediate result is one thing. You can test for whichever drugs you want to within reason with both rapid and lab-based testing. There are, you know, if you go down a little ways to the collection process, sometimes people do consider that rapid collection on site to be a simpler collection process, because you're streamlining the entire testing process by not having to send somebody to an offsite facility. And adulteration is still possible, whether it's lab-based or rapid. You're going to get your initial screen result very quickly. If it's negative, you're going to be able to make an immediate employment decision. If it's positive, you're going to want to send that result to a laboratory, and then you're going to kind of fall into that same category, waiting for a confirmation test to take place. And that could take up to a day, 2, 3 days, depending on the timing of when that specimen lands at the laboratory. Look down at the bottom again, though. We're still talking about adulteration or drug test cheating, which, if you saw some of the reports that have come out this year, we see that drug test cheating has increased significantly over the last year. Let's turn our attention to oral fluid testing for a moment. The pros, easier to collect, so collections can take place anytime, anywhere. You're not looking to secure a bathroom so that people can't take a product in there to add it to a urine sample. You're not trying to match the donor and the collector genders for those for an observed collection, etc. Adulteration is nearly impossible because, again, the donor and the collector are together the whole time. With oral fluid testing, that collector is observing the process 100%. So things that might possibly be done to alter an oral fluid sample really becomes, sort of a moot issue because those things just aren't applicable to an oral fluid collection. If you go down to the second to the bottom, it eliminates dealing with urine because that's important to some companies. I'm a fan of both urine and oral fluid testing. I've been, promoting both of them my whole 35-year career, but some people want to get away from that for various reasons. Usually it has something to do with the collection process. So those fast results make a big difference when it comes to choosing between rapid and lab-based testing. But if it's positive, presumptive positive, you're going to send that sample on. So you're still going to wait for that confirmed positive result to come back. You may run into some issues like down at the bottom, not being able to test for all the drugs that you want to. It just depends. Although with today's technology, you're looking at some pretty expansive drug testing panels that are available. So that's usually not a big issue. And some of the exact same issues that apply to urine, lab-based versus rapid, also apply to oral fluid testing. The biggest difference, though, is that you've got an easier collection process with oral fluid. And if the immediate result is important to you, being able to do the collection on site or even at an off-site facility with a professional technician, you're still going to get that immediate result and be able to make a very fast employment decision, whether it's to hire somebody or, in the case of a negative result, put somebody back to work. And so that whole process just becomes streamlined, and it takes the waiting out of the drug testing process. And for some companies, especially in tight hiring markets, that's a priority nowadays. It doesn't diminish in any way at all the value of a lab-based test, whether it's oral fluid or urine. It just depends on what you're looking for, what your needs are. Both testing methods are great, and if you do get a presumptive positive with an on-site rapid result, you're going to want to send that sample into a laboratory. It's a best practice. It's going to increase the legal defensibility of your program and acting on the result itself, but also in many states it's required by that state's law. Okay, so some things to consider. I know I went through that pretty fast, but you're going to have the slides when we get the recording. You can kind of slowly go through it. But let's go to our next poll question, Greta, number 3.
Thanks, Bill. Our third poll question reads, which on-site rapid testing method do you prefer? And the choices are urine, oral fluid, or none of the above. And 38% of you said urine, 58% said oral fluid, and 4% said none of the above.
And Greta, that's interesting because maybe just 5 years ago, it would have been the reverse of that. We would have seen a higher percentage for urine than oral fluid, but I think oral fluid is starting to grow in popularity. So let me turn the virtual microphone over to Yvette again.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to talk briefly through a few sections. We're going to start talking about ideal workplace settings for on-site rapid testing. Right. So when and where do rapid testing make sense? One of the biggest groups that we see who rapid testing makes the most sense for are remote work sites. Work sites that are far from a testing facility, far from a collection facility. I'm going to add in there employees who are working off hours, maybe a graveyard shift, where it's just extremely time consuming or difficult to get employees from the work site to a collection facility or to a testing facility, and who want an answer right away and who don't want to wait a few days to get a response. That's on-site rapid testing is really great for work sites like that. Rapid testing is also great for safety sensitive work sites where you're doing a lot of drug testing. Say you do a lot of post-accident testing, reasonable suspicion testing, you're doing regular random testing, and it's just really nice to get a quick answer, to get the negative employees with a negative result back to work, and not waiting a few days because you really have a high volume of testing. Rapid testing is great for when you need a fast hiring decision, and depending on the labor market, we've seen in recent years that it's really difficult to hire, and being able to tell someone right there on the spot, like, yep, you're hired, you're on the work site, and you're not facing losing that potential employee because of a delay in getting them approved to work. Additionally, when you need to get your employees back to work quickly, it's really great to get those negative results right away and get those employees back to work. Rapid testing is great when you need to improve a donor's experience, when they don't want to take the time and inconvenience to go to an off-site facility, or they don't want the inconvenience of having to be out of work for a period of time while they're waiting for their results. It's really nice to have a rapid result, and here oral fluid is really great for a donor's experience too. Being able to do an oral fluid sample rather than give a urine sample with a stranger waiting for you is really convenient and great for a donor's testing experience. Dealing with a tight budget, Bill's going to talk a few slides from now about return on investment and how rapid on-site testing can really help the bottom line. As well, rapid on-site testing is really great in marijuana-friendly states, particularly oral fluid. Like Bill was talking about, oral fluid testing, and particularly rapid oral fluid testing, has a very tight window of detection. So if you are in a state that restricts what kind of marijuana positives you can take employment action on, it's great to have a test that has a tight window of detection, that is not giving you a marijuana positive that's from marijuana use from a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and especially when you need to combine it with signs of impairment, it's great to have that all lined up in a short period of time. Seeing signs of impairment in the workplace, doing a rapid test and getting a result right then, and being able to take action on it based on that is very convenient and helpful, and the number of those states is growing. So I'm going to turn it back to Greta for another poll, and then I'll join back with you and talk some more.
Thank you, Yvette. And for our fourth poll, which of the following would be your preference when conducting on-site rapid result testing? And your choices are: conduct a test at the workplace with professional collector, I believe, I'm sorry, must have cut off. Conduct a test at the workplace with employees, and conduct a test at an off-site collection facility. I'll give everyone a few seconds. And 28% said conduct a test at the workplace with professional collectors. 58% said conduct a test at the workplace with trained employees. And 14% said conduct a test at an off-site collection facility.
Thank you, Greta. We're going to talk about what to look for in a rapid result device. So first, of course, your question is going to be, do you want to do oral fluid testing or urine testing, or a combination of both? That's going to depend on your needs. Do you have a facility to do urine testing? Do you have marijuana-friendly laws that require a shorter window of detection, or that require testing that only detects the parent drug versus metabolites? These are questions you need to answer when deciding whether you want an oral fluid device or a urine rapid screening device. And again, like our poll just talked about, you need to decide if you want a test that allows your own employees to conduct the testing versus devices that need a professional technician to come in and do the testing. And again, that's going to depend on the specifics of that workplace and that work site. You need to, again, as I keep harping on, look at your state laws, because some state laws require the use of an FDA cleared device. And we have a list of some of those states: Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Nevada, North Carolina, Oregon. In those states, it's going to be very important for you to pick a device that's FDA cleared. You also need to look at your state laws to know if you need to do confirmation testing, and if confirmation testing has to be done on the same sample. Some states will allow you to do a rapid result test and then send them to a lab for a confirmation test that can just collect a new sample from them. Other states are going to require confirmation testing to be done on the sample of the initial test. And so that's important in deciding what testing device you need to choose. And like we've been talking about window of detection, do you want an oral fluid device that's going to give you a short window of detection? Or do you want to go with a test that's going to give you a longer window of detection? And that just depends on the employer. Some employers do want a longer window of detection, and they want to know if an employee has used substances, a few days ago, a week ago. That's something that's important to them, and they want the longer window of detection. Whereas others want to know, I want to know if they've been using recently, if they're possibly impaired on the job, and state law plays into that as well. Some state laws regarding marijuana are going to require you to know if it is recent use versus historical use. So those are all things to think about in determining what device is best for your workplace. And I'm going to go back to Greta for another poll.
Thank you, Yvette. And for our last poll, would you ever consider using a rapid result with a digital workflow and eCCF for confirmation? And I'll give everyone a few minutes. Seconds. The options are yes, we already do. Yes, but I need to learn more about it. No, we would prefer to send the employee or job candidate to an off-site collection facility. And not at this time. Okay, and 41% of you said yes, we already do. 51% said yes, but I need to learn more about it. 2% said no, we would prefer to send the employee or job candidate off to a collection facility. And 6% said not at this time.
Thank you, Greta. I'm going to turn the slides over to Bill now to talk about return on investment, and then I think we'll have time for some questions at the end.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you, audience, for those polling question results. That's very informative and helpful. We've learned a lot from that. So I'm going to present a return on investment formula for you. And of course, ROI can be measured lots of different ways, right? Is it achieving your objectives, or is it a budget financial driven result that you're looking for? Okay, so I'm going to share just one formula with you, and I just want to say that these are my numbers. They're not the result of what Abbott sells drug testing for, or a survey that we did, and these are the average prices. This is just from talking to people in the industry, and then I came up with these averages. So as you look at it, don't be too driven by the number, but by the concept that I'm going to share with you. Okay, and you can use your own numbers with this formula, right? You're going to get these slides when you get the recording, so you can plug in your own numbers. But let's look at it this way. Okay, I'm going to compare urine testing, lab-based urine testing, with oral fluid testing, and it's going to be a rapid oral fluid test in this case. Okay, so I just picked out one example. I have this formula for all kinds of different combinations of testing methods, but I picked this one in the interest of time. So the cost of the device, we don't have a rapid result device for the urine because we're talking about lab. So, but for the oral fluid testing, I put in $5. I know you could be paying more than that, but you could be paying about $5. And so I put $5 in. For the end user price, this is what the employer is going to pay again. For the collection of the sample, I put in $25 for urine and $0 for oral fluid, because we're going to do it on site with our own trained employees in this particular model. The $25 could be less, it could be more if you're talking about remote workplaces or graveyard shifts, etc. But I put in $25, okay? And then the end user price for the lab analysis, I put in $18 for urine, I put in $25 for the oral fluid if we have to use the laboratory. But let's put worst case scenario in there. And then nothing for confirmation. I've just built it into those prices above there. And the MRO fee, I just applied a $5 average to both of them, okay? So the urine lab comes out to 48, the rapid oral fluid comes out to 35. And again, these are just my numbers, okay? Now I'm gonna add in the cost, the soft dollar cost of drug testing when I have to use, or when I want to calculate the lost productivity of time lost by workers participating in a drug test. So I put in an hourly rate for my worker who's being tested at $15, and for my supervisor who's going to accompany that individual to the collection site or be involved in the test at $40 an hour. So, and I also put in an average time of 1.5 hours, an hour and a half for the urine test, sending somebody to an offsite collection facility. I know I've heard from many people it can be 2 or 3 hours. I went with an hour and a half to be conservative. And for the oral fluid, I just put in 20 minutes on site at the workplace, about 20 minutes to administer that test. And then I'm going to apply it to those hourly rates. So $22.50 for the worker to do the urine test off site, or $5, which is a third of their hourly rate to do the oral fluid test on site. Same for the supervisor who's going to be involved in it, $60 to go off site with that individual who's participating, say, for example, in a reasonable suspicion test, and $13.33 so for the oral fluid. So when I look at both of them side by side with both the hard dollars and the soft dollars, you can see that when I calculate the time that it takes for workers to be off the job, not doing what I'm normally paying them to do, the cost of a lab-based urine test using an off-site facility for the collection is about $130, including the soft dollars, okay? And with Rapid, it's about $53. I'm saving a lot there. You can look at these formulas in all kinds of different ways. You could increase the cost of your oral fluid test. You could add different costs into the equation as well. You can see on the previous slide that I could actually add in the fringe rate as well, or taxes and insurance and things that are on top of their hourly rate. I didn't do that for this example, but you could do that, and you could use this formula for that. Generally speaking, rapid testing is going to cost less, but it depends on what your objectives are, whether it meets your needs. So in conclusion, there's lots of things going on right now in the world that are causing employers to question the value of drug testing, not whether it works, not whether it's good to do, but can they afford to do it? The economy, competitive hiring markets, the pressure and confusion that's created by these legal marijuana laws, it can create a lot of confusion on the part of employers to deal with drug testing as well, even though they want to get the benefits of drug testing, because there are numerous studies that show that drug testing works in terms of a deterrence to drug use, which lowers costs in the workplace like accidents and workers' comp claims, et cetera. So again, concluding with the end in mind, all of these things become possible. The streamlining of the process, same-day hiring decision, putting workers back on the job faster, et cetera. All of that's more possible with on-site rapid testing. And going back to that survey result that I shared at the beginning, most people in the drug testing world predict that over the next 3 years, on-site testing, rapid result testing is going to increase. About 68% said it'll increase, 28% said it'll at least stay the same. So I think we're heading in that direction because it meets a lot of needs that employers are dealing with right now. And so with that, let me open it up to any questions that you have. Greta, do we have any questions submitted from our audience?
Hi, Bill. Yes, we do. One of the questions is, can you list any states that have laws forbidding rapid testing?
Well, I do know Vermont, Minnesota. It used to be Minnesota, and that just changed this month. And I can't give you a full list, and it's a little bit complicated. Do we include states that have laboratory licensing laws that restrict where it can be collected, because that makes New York and I think Nevada complicated. States that require you to do DOT procedures. So I can't give a full list, but I know for sure Vermont, and I know Minnesota has changed, and I know lab licensing law makes it tricky in New York and Nevada, and California can be a little bit tricky with their lab licensing law as well.
Thanks, Yvette. I do have another question. This one reads, how do you handle the shy bladder equivalent for saliva collections? Reported dry mouth and or lack of cooperation because the donor is swallowing saliva and or sucking on the device. Maybe you know about this, Bill.
Yeah, so let me answer that question this way, right? With urine, you have shy bladder, of course, and that can be a legitimate issue. I mean, it's not necessarily somebody trying to get out of the drug test or faking it. It could be a legitimate excuse at a time. And there are procedures within, say, for example, if you wanted to use the SAMHSA/DOT regulations as sort of a blueprint, there are some procedures that you can use for that purpose. With oral fluid testing, you're talking about dry mouth syndrome instead, and that also can be legitimate as well. And I would refer you to those new SAMHSA/DOT guidelines for that. But what's good about possibly having a blended program where you're using both urine and oral fluid, whether it's rapid or lab-based, is that if somebody does have a legitimate shy bladder excuse, you can switch to oral fluid testing or vice versa. And so I think what we'll see going forward is we'll see a lot of companies using both, the best of both worlds under different circumstances. They may use urine versus oral fluid, or a rapid test versus a lab-based test. And that will overcome issues like shy bladder and dry mouth syndrome.
Thanks, Bill. This question, Yvette, you might not know of all the states that require this, but you might have maybe one or two examples. They're wondering which states require confirmation testing of the same sample.
Oh, that's a great question, and I do not know that off the top of my head. I'd have to go look that up in our current compliance database. No, I'm sorry, I don't know any of those off the top of my head. Bill, do you know any?
Yeah, there are. I mean, it's a small number of states that require that. Maybe about 6 states. And you have to keep in mind with these state drug testing laws, the ones that have mandatory or voluntary drug testing laws, more than the case law examples, is that many of these state laws were written decades ago, 20, 25, even 30 years ago. And they didn't sort of have the vision of these new and emerging technologies that are becoming popular today, like rapid oral fluid testing, for example, and whether it would be feasible to send the same sample in. So, to the lab for confirmation tests. So some of that is affected by it because the language of these state laws didn't envision these new technologies, and therefore the law is written sort of in a very strict way, and that may not be the intent of the lawmakers in those states today. But if you have any specific states that you're interested in knowing about, put it in the chat section and we'll look it up for you and send you an email and let you know.
Thanks, Bill. Well, let's go ahead and wrap things up for today's presentation. On behalf of the Current Consulting Group and Abbott, we hope you found today's presentation informative and helpful. I want to thank Bill and Yvette for speaking on this topic and sharing their expertise. And I also want to thank Abbott for sponsoring today's webinar. If you submitted a question that we didn't answer here today, we will answer you offline, and we will also send you follow-up information in an email on how to access the recorded version of today's presentation. In addition, we will also send you continuing education information for those of you that qualify to receive 1 credit for attending today's presentation in its entirety. Thank you for your attendance today, and this concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.